Hello there. Hello there. I'm gonna ask an initial question. How many English speakers are here? Just English, no Portuguese. Okay, then I'm gonna do in English. If you wanna follow the slides, you can access this link. Then you can see the slides on your laptop. If it works, is WebSocket. We never know when it works or not. So let's get started. I'm going to talk today about this guy, min.js. It's a tool to quickly prototype apps or even release to production. Okay? But talking about myself, I'm David Ferreira. I'm Portuguese. I'm a front-end engineer. Sometimes I do full stack, but at the moment I'm doing front-end only. You can follow me on Twitter. I usually share tips about front-end development or whatever I found about Node.js, MongoDB, or just whatever I want to share. I live in Amsterdam, this beautiful city. I recommend anyone of you to visit. It's a lovely city. And in Amsterdam, I started to work with front-end. I came from a PHP background. I was doing PHP, then I was doing some Python. But in Amsterdam, I noticed the front-end world was evolving so fast. I wanted to grow up professionally, but on the front-end development. So I decided to go to JavaScript. And exactly the very same year that I decided to go to front-end, everything started blowing up about JavaScript. There was a party, everyone was talking about frameworks, stuff, Node.js, MongoDB came. Everyone was celebrating it. So when we started to develop full-stack applications, we had some problem like this one. We had the server, we had the client, and then we had the full-stack mess because code was not organized, APIs were not working properly. If we do things fast to prototype, that what we do on our jobs, usually is just creating a POC or just prototyping some web app. We need to do it fast. And if we want to do everything ourselves, we have a full stack mess. And if we want to make it in production, then we most likely need to rewrite it, etc. So at some point we end up with some weird architecture that no one understands. And then we quit the job, and the next developer is me. And then I don't understand anything. And then the game turns to the point zero. I develop another mess, and then the next guy after me has a mess. So thing is not organized. Talking about min.js, I have one app in production with min.js. It's actually my startup. It's a platform where you can buy art online. That's called Access Art. It's on production. It was just a proof of concept. It's still a proof of concept, but it's written in min.js. So I have the personal experience of having a min.js app in production. Okay, min stands for MongoDB, Express, Angular, and Node.js. Okay. Let's start with the first one, Mongo. Mongo is not the Mongo. That some people, like most likely developers, were on the Pokemon Go. They were just seeing Pokemongo, like I did. But stands for MongoDB, which means humongous. Then they took the Mongo word, which means enormous, gigantic. And they created this database. This consists of a database, a non-relational database, where you store objects on it. So it's a NoSQL database. It's pretty nice because if you are working with a full-stack framework, most likely you want your database to be also JavaScript, right? If you need to write a function, a store procedure, you write it in JavaScript. That's cool. Second thing, Express.js. Besides this is getting a bit outdated, there are a lot of production apps using Express.js. Which is pretty nice. On the recent years, Restify came and is creating way better approach than Express, but there are two different things. min.js is using Express most likely to have an API. And with Express you can just serve templates, etc., that we are not using in min.js. Third thing, AngularJS. Angular is that framework that is created by Google. Now there is Angular 2. which was released a few weeks ago, but main stack is still using the Angular 1.5. I'm pretty sure in a few months we'll be with Angular 2. And the last thing that was created in 2009 is Node.js. Who has ever worked with Node.js here? Nice. If we are working on the front-end development, most likely we have used Node. If we do npm install something, we are executing a Node package, right? Node package manager. So Node changed the way that the front-end development is built, is done. And that's fantastic, right? Because we just have packages that we can download and use. That's really nice. On the main stack, Node has a fundamental rule to serve the content, right? The API stack, the API serves the whatever is on the database. We have Mongo as a middleware between the database and the front end, and it's still JavaScript, so it's pretty cool. And one thing that I found fascinating about Node is that it's so simple to create a server. Like if we execute this code on a node, we'll have something like this. So we execute that code, we do a node serve, server is running. If you go to the localhost, then we have a server. We are serving something really simple, which just shows whatever is on the URL. But just with several lines of code, 3 lines, could be 1 line, but with just these characters, we have a node server. Of course, you don't have all the features there, but it's a node server. Min.js works with a very important architecture. It was built based on the CRUD methodology. Who has ever worked about CRUD? CRUD. Oh yeah. Yes, that's the one. CRUD is a really nice thing. Every app has a CRUD. Well, usually you don't delete stuff, but CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. And Min.js was meant to be a platform that CRUD is the main important thing, because we want to prototype apps, we want to have insert data, we want to list it, we want to update the data, and then eventually we want to delete it. Okay? So what are we going to do today? Today I have a really basic Min application. I changed some things because I don't want to bother you with CSS and I don't want to bother with HTML. I just want to show you how easy it is to create an application to create information on the application and to delete it. So now it's showtime, okay? So let's open our code editor. And I want to ask you something. If you are not seeing something on screen, or if I forget to zoom in, please bug me, okay? So the structure of the Min.js is by modules. So each module has the client code, the server code, and the test code, okay? So if I open the very default folder that comes with the Min stack, I have the client, server, and test, okay? If I open the client, then I have an Angular app. Who has ever worked with Angular here? Nice. Who is working with React? Sorry. Angular is a really good framework for the front end, and Min has it outside of the box. But before I show you the code, I want to show the application, how it looks like. Of course, it was, okay, let's serve it. Yes. Now it's going to work. Okay. So this is the initial, well, it was a bit changed, was customized for the Pixel Camp. But one thing that Min.js has that for me was made me the decision to go for Min is the authentication. Who has ever implemented authentication on your application? Is it nice? It's not nice, right? If we need to handle the server and the client, okay, could be a bit difficult, but then let's talk about connect with Facebook, log in with Twitter, log in with whatever. If I want to click the prototype, I don't want those annoyances, right? So Min.js has already edit profile, a change profile picture, a change password, And even better, it uses Passport.js, which has a trillion of different strategies for logging in. I can connect Facebook, Twitter, Google+, etc. It's already there. So if I'm prototyping an app, I don't care about authentication. Done. Okay, that's done. Let's stick to the more important thing. I want to build the app itself. Okay, let's do it then. So I have my simple app. What would you think that would be the first thing to do in this app to create a record? What is it missing on the screen? Who wants to take the chance? Yes? Sorry? A form, exactly, good one. We need a form to insert data. But before the form, we need a button to go to the form, okay? So let's add a button. We are using Bootstrap, so let's add a simple button to the top. Min stack comes with a service. And this service, okay. Let me tell before what I'm going to build. I'm going to build a simple form that I can add pixels. Of course, we are celebrating pixels. We are on the pixels camp. So we are going to create pixels to a list and then create the pixels order on that you can see all the pixels there. We can choose the color. We can remove them. So I create the module called pixels. That's the one. So I have the client code, and then I have a structure, an initial structure. A config, CSS, form, SAS. CSS was generated by SAS. Of course, you can just stick to one of each, both. Both are coming with the min stack. And then we have the module.js file, it's Angular, and then we have the service. Okay, let's start with the module.js file. As simple as I just declare the module, a new module called pixels. I import the module core, which is here. I also import the pixels.services and the pixels.roots. And I tell Angular that for pixels.roots, I have these dependencies that I want to have injected, okay? So far so good. If someone is not following everything, please let me know or ask me afterwards, okay? Second thing is the button. So our problem was to add a button to the top. So min comes with the menu service, which is that one, okay? And with this menu service, I comment out the code, so I'm going to uncomment it and start explaining, because otherwise we could spend hours just typing code, and we don't want that. So the very first thing, what we want to do is we have the menu service and the add menu item. So min stack comes with this library that builds the menu for us, manages the menu for us. So we give the menu a name, in this case the top bar, and then we give a title, a state, a type, and the roles that are allowed to access that specific item, okay? So what I added here was a menu item called pixels, which goes to the state called pixels. I'm going to explain what state is later on. The type is a drop-down, so it's not a button. When I click, it will open a drop-down, and then only users with the role user can access it. If I have a user called admin, only admin will be able to access. Or if I want user and admin to access, I just put the two roles on the array. Because min.js knows already the user role and what to do, right? But let's stick to user only. Second thing is I have a drop-down, and I want to have a sub-menu item, okay? So this sub-menu item, it is going to be created on the top bar, okay? It's going to be inside or within the pixels one, which is this one, and then the title we want add pixel. The state, when I click on it, is going to redirect to the pixels.create, okay? And again, the role, only user can access it. So if I go to the application, here we go. Now I have a menu already. And I don't need to worry about how Bootstrap does it or whatever. I can just have a web designer to handle the HTML and CSS. I'm a JavaScript developer. I just do this part in JavaScript. The rest is handled by someone else on my team, right? So if I click on it, I will have a button called Add Pixel. But it's not going anywhere. Let's see why. So I open the inspector. Okay, now it's complaining. Pixels.create cannot be resolved by Angular. So this is an Angular error. And that happens because on our root, that's our root files, I define the states and the URLs, okay? So do you remember when I mentioned the state, that when I click goes to a certain state, here is the place to define. So let's define a create screen. So I uncomment it. What I'm telling here to the state, Angular state provider, this is Angular. For those who never worked with Angular, could look a bit complicated, but that's the Angular UI router, which help us to have routes or URLs on our Angular application to be easily reachable to a certain state of the app. Like using directories, but are not directories, are just HTML5 routing. Okay? What I'm doing here, I'm creating the state pixels. And this state pixels is going to be the parent state. That's why I say abstract true. So it's a state that I cannot navigate to, okay? What I'm telling is, always on my application, I hit /pixels, is going to be on that state. But in this moment, /pixels by itself, it won't work, okay? Because it's abstract. This is to put sub-URLs in a chain, okay? So that's the second thing. I'm doing pixels.create, so it's inside the pixels parent state. And here I tell the URL is going to be /create. In this case, if I navigate my application to /pixels/create, I will be hitting the pixels.create state, okay? So far, is it being clear? Does anyone have any questions so far? Cool. Then I call the template URL. I'm using something that I shouldn't be using on the min stack, because min stack doesn't have Babel. So Babel is not transpiling the ES6 features to ES5. So I shouldn't use this line of code in production. But I could integrate Babel on it and be safe to use. So what I'm telling here is that this variable, or this constant actually, is going to be a prefix of the rest of the strings that I want to put down. And in this case, I want to tell that in the directory form/pixels.client.form.html is going to be a template. Then I define the controller. This controller is going to be called pixels form controller. A good thing about the Angular is that I can reuse a lot of stuff. So this controller is going to do two things. I'm not going to mention the update today, but if I would be creating and updating, I just need to create one form, one controller for both, okay? Because the only difference is one has ID, the other doesn't have ID yet, because it was not saved. So I can use the same form. And then I create an alias, because Angular has a controller as a feature that helps me to scope my variables for the template on a totally blank context, okay? So before I was using scope, but that was deprecated. Now the best practice is to use controller as. So on my template, I'm going to do pixels form ctrl dot any variable name that I have inside the controller, because it's going to be an object. And then I'm doing a resolve. This resolve could be used to resolve data from the server. There is an eternal discussion about if it should be put in the roots or in the controller. I don't care. In this moment, I'm just putting here, and sometimes I have it on the controller. It always depends on the case. But just for this demo, I'm going to stick to having the resolver in the roots itself. What I'm doing is I'm telling that lpixel, and with 2 underscores, because we all know him or she or her, I'm injecting the pixel service. And this pixel service is going to be the main responsible to communicate with the backend. Okay? This pixel service is going to have a definition, and I'm going to show that I can tell the API definitions of it. If I have a really bizarre API that has XML or something, I do it on the service. I don't do it here, I don't do it on the controller. The service is responsible to communicate with the server. Okay? So what I'm doing here, I'm just creating a new one. I'm telling, hey, this is the new pixel service. If I would be accessing an existing an existing pixel, I wouldn't do a new pixel service. I would do something like pixel service dot get, for example, and then I would pass the ID here, okay? But I don't want to retrieve an existing one. What I wanted to do is just create a new pixel. That's it. I have a brand new pixel ready to be used. And then there is the last definition, which is the data. I can add whatever I want here because it can be reused along the application. And on min case, the page title is the title that's going to show on the top bar. Okay, so I don't need to change it with JavaScript. I can just tell here that I want the title to be this. If I have an international app with internationalization, I can use the translate service, the Angular translate service, and here it will detect automatically which language I have stored on my application. But for this demo, I'm just going to use a simple string. Okay. Then the roles. This must be consistent with the menu service. Because if on the menu service I allow a user to access this route, but if here I forget about it, the transition to that state is going to be denied. Okay? So sometimes we are just struggling with a bug and we cannot find, and the bug is sometimes that we are not consistent with the roles. Okay? So we covered the menus, we covered the routes. Now let's cover the service that I was talking a few minutes ago. So you can see it here, pixels.client.service, and the service looks like this. As with min.js, I have totally control on the API because I'm going to develop the API as well. The service looks simple as this. What I'm telling here is that the endpoint, the API endpoint for this pixel module is going to be API/pixels/ the pixel ID if it exists. If it doesn't, it will be only API/pixels. But in the database, MongoDB stores the IDs on an underscore ID. That's the default. And I don't want to change the default, okay? Because I'm prototyping, I don't care about it. Probably I will do for some other application, for some other reasons. But as I'm prototyping, I want to get things as simple as possible. So I'm telling that the backend uses the underscore ID, but the front end is using the pixel ID. Okay? So always that I'm talking on the front end side is pixel ID and not underscore ID. And then I'm telling that the update function must do the method put. If I don't have it, it's going to be post. For some reason, we have a server that requires the update to be a post. We change it to post. Okay? So that's why the HTTP verb in this case is going to be put. Okay. So final thing. We spoke about menus, we spoke about routes, a service. Now let's go to the controller, which is the core of the module, okay, of this endpoint. So I'm going to open the form folder directory, and I'm going to open the controller. So here is getting a bit bigger. You can read for a while I drink water. So you can try to guess what it does. Okay, starting on the top. I do a pixels form controller .inject, $inject. That's an Angular way of injecting dependencies. So I'm injecting the state service. That's an Angular service. I can change transition to states or get the current state. And then I inject the L underscore pixel. Do you remember where this comes from? Who remembers where that L underscore pixel comes from? Okay, it comes from here. So that's the resolver. So what I'm telling Angular to do is that there is a service which is available. It's called L pixel. It's going to be a brand new pixel, and it's going to be injected here. So I can use it on my controller as a variable. And then I inject a library called Toaster just to show toast notifications. Pretty simple. And then this is my controller. I'm going to uncomment this. And now I do something really weird. For those who are JavaScript developers, they understand what I'm doing here. I'm basically copying the this context to the VM variable, because the this context can change within the functions, and we don't want to mess around with that. So we just use the this of the parent controller everywhere and never changes. So what I'm defining here are three variables. One is the pixel, so it's the new service. The second is the save method. Whatever I click on save is going to execute that function. And then the regenerate colors. This is a function that I'm going to show later. Okay. The template looks something like this. It's just HTML with Angular flavored. And what I want to highlight here is that on our roots we had the controller as, which is here, and now always I use something from the controller. I want to identify it. I'm going to use the controller object. In this case, I'm saying that this form, whenever I press submit, is going to execute the save function, okay, to run the save function. Then I have an input file where I say that the pixel object is going to have a property called name, and it's going to be the pixel name, which is optional. And then I have something here that I was creating this morning on the shaking train. For those who were following me on Twitter, the train was really shaky. But I was able to create this little color picker, which shows a list of colors that come from the available colors array that I define on the controller, which is here, available colors. And then what I do is, on these regenerate colors, these two functions are just creating really random colors. So the result of it is going to be something like this. So I have a form with a title, a bunch of colors, and two buttons. A button is to randomize the colors, so I can change the colors, and I can create a color. It's going to be this green, and I'm going to call it, give me a name. Sorry? Pixel 1, excellent name. But wait, one with written or number? Number, like this. Okay, cool. Okay, to be descriptive, let's put it like this. Okay, so I create the pixel. Okay, now I have the toaster working on top. Nice, pixel saved successfully. But now you may be wondering, how did this happen? Because you didn't work on the backend. Well, I worked before, and I wanted to show the backend how it works. But if you go to the network tab, I can see that the post was done. So it's here, sorry, here. I send the color and the name, and then the backend eventually is going to assign an ID. With Mongo, is going to assign an ID, created by. Those are things that are done on the backend. So let's see the backend, how it looks like. So let's close the pixels directory, and let's open the server. And the server has 4 folders. One is the roots, policies, modules, and controllers. So we start with the roots, and that's it. I import a policy, which is a security policy for the authentication, for roles, etc. I'm not going to go deep on that because that can get really complex. And then I define that this root API/pixels is going to use that specific policy, and then wherever I do a post, it has a callback, which is on this controller .create. So it's going to be a function called create. So if I go for it, I see the controller, I export whatever method I want to export here, and then this function is going to look like this. So I create a new pixel with everything that's coming on the body, and be careful, don't do this, because if some not well-intentioned user posts something else than whatever I want to store on database, could be stored. Fortunately, Min.js covers that. So I have to define a model on the backend. So if someone tries to be clever and posts something that doesn't exist on the model, it won't be persisted on the database. That's a good thing. And then I assign the current user to the created by, so I know automatically which user it is, because Express stores, the Express and Passport.js stores the current user, current logged user on the rec.user, and then I do a pixel.save. And then, if successful, I respond with the JSON response, with the new object, the new created object. Or if there is an error on the database not available or something, I just tell the user that something got wrong, okay? That looks something like this. For the model, that's the one. Our object is really simple, it's just a name and a color, okay? So what I have is the created by, which is good practice to have always on the databases, and then I have the name and the color. If my color would be a number, I would just do a number. Or if my color would be an object with RGB, I would do a R number, G number, number. For instance, like this. So that's the good thing about the non-relational database and NoSQL databases. MongoDB specifically, you can store an object and you can have multiple levels of data on the same rows. But let's keep it simple. So this is how our application, how it looks like. Okay. So we covered the create on the min.js, and now is the point to ask: is there any question that you would like to? Yes, yes. What he is asking is if the API covers the authentication, the security, etc. Because I didn't go into details. Yes, if I open this file, the policies file, but on a higher level than this policy file, there is Passport.js, and Passport.js handles a lot of things, a lot of security stuff, sessions, stuff like that. So here, what I tell is that I want to create an access rule that if I access the /API/pixels, the only permission for user is to post. Okay? So here I really tell that user only can post. Okay? If only admin could post and the user could get data, it would look something like this. Exactly. Because the thing is, you have to protect the front end. Okay, the front end is done, but you have to have exactly the same rules on the back end. But usually, when you have a full stack application, you must do exactly like that. The validations that you have on the front end, you must have on the back end. How many of, sorry?
If I didn't put the rules user, I didn't show the menu to the user role, it would still post directly to the API.
Yes, it could post. It could post, but the API would know, hey, there is not a definition for that, so you are not authorized. So it would return a forbidden.
No, but you're allowing it here, right?
Yeah.
You're allowing it here, right?
Again, sorry?
You're allowing
Yes, I'm allowing that.
user to post here.
Yes, exactly. Oh yeah, because I changed a bit, it was something like this. Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so they are defined.
Yeah, they are totally separated. Yeah.
And for the front end, is there a way to define the visibility of the menu, not through the roles, but through the permissions?
Based on the permissions that I have on the backend.
So instead of saying this menu will show up for users with a given role, is there a way to say this menu, this button should appear for users with a given permission?
No.
Okay.
That would be great.
I know.
So I challenge you to go to min repository and create that and submit a pull request. That would be really great. Because right now there is this annoyance that you have to have everything declared on the backend, but also on the front end, and we don't want that.
Yeah, no, and if all of a sudden there's a new role, you have to go through everywhere, say, okay, the role
Exactly.
has this.
Exactly.
Okay.
What you can do is having a service on the backend that handles the roles, and then it's just an API endpoint that the front end can ask and say, hey, which role is allowed to do what? So you can start doing on top of it. But let's not talk about that now because otherwise we have to spend a lot of time. But your question was really interesting one. You had also a question.
My question was about verifying the fields. So when I input a color, I can just open the JavaScript console and change it, for example. Would it influence, is there a verification step, or can I, in your example, the color is just a string, and if I change it to be like a sentence, it would be stored in the backend?
Yes,
as
it would.
is.
It would, yes.
Okay.
Because that would happen because I don't have any kind of validation. And as I'm just talking on a high level how MinJS works for prototyping apps, I'm telling the basic things, but of course there are validation methods. And for that you would do it somewhere here. So we go to the server controller, server model. And I would have something like, for color, I would have a type, right? And then validate. I'm not sure about the syntax now. Sorry? Exactly. So you could give a function, or just on the pre-save hook, you can also verify whatever is going on. And actually, good you mentioned that because I can show how it's being handled for the user. So I have the users module, the server, and then the modules. And okay, this looks a bit big because it's quite complex. But at some point, I have the username, which is required, must be unique. It changes it to lowercase and removes all the spaces. And then on the... Exactly. Validate, yes. So I pass an array with the function and the error, which could be also a translation key. And then on the pre-save, checks the salt and password, and then it has the pre-validate. So this is the hook that validates the password in this case. So if you read the documentation about, this is not the Min documentation, this is the Mongo documentation, or in this case the Mongoose, which is the library that Min is using to handle the MongoDB stuff. There are a lot of stuff that you can do with the hooks, with the data, and create all kind of validations. But I would need an entire 8 hours workshop to mention all these little things, which are little but really important on an app, and I strongly recommend to use on an app in production. Okay, any other question? Cool, there are no more questions. What I wanted to do now is something is wrong. Yes, I have errors. Okay, I was changing stuff. Let's just reset everything. Okay. So what I wanted to do now is to get the list of colors that were added. So let's go to the second part. So we mentioned the create. Let's go for read. So let's get the read information. So on the front end side, I want to have a new item on our code, right? Is the list. So again, let's go to the initial level. We have the application. We want to see which data is stored on our database. So let's add a new menu item. So we want to add this button, pixels order. Okay. So if we go to the config and menus, again, we add a submenu item for the state pixels.index with this title, and only user is allowed to go there. Okay. Then I go to the roots. So here we go. I have the state pixels.index, and if you see this URL is empty. This is an Angular thing. I'm telling here that if I access /pixels, without anything else, Angular knows that must go to this state, okay? I mean, if you go to /pixels without another slash. If you want to have another extra slash, then you have to do like this. Then you have /pixel/ and then you are in this state. But let's not overcomplicate now. So I'm telling that I want to use the pixels controller. Controller as is again pixels ctrl, and then I want to resolve something that's on the database. In this case, I'm not doing the new pixel service. I'm just calling a function from Angular service API, which is the pixel service .query. .query automatically knows that must do a GET request to the API, and it will be returned an array. If it is not an array, it's going to fail. If I return an object with multiple stuff, I will have an exception in Angular. Or I can change my service to tell, hey, this particular API for a GET will have an object response and not an array. So I can play with that on the service. Now let's go for the controller. The controller looks as simple as this. As I have already resolved the pixels order object, and it's already on our application, I just need to assign it to a template variable, to a view variable, okay? So I declare a variable called pixels, an object inside the VM object pixels, and I use it on the template. And on the template, I have a ng repeat, and I tell every pixel in the pixels, I want to repeat through them. But now I have something nice that I'm reusing on the previous, on the create form and on this one. So if I go to the create form, I have CSS here, right? So the only information I have on JavaScript the only information that I have in JavaScript is the color, is the string, RGB code. But like I have the width, the height, etc. I'm using Sass for that. But in order to tell the DOM that the color, the background color should be red or whatever, I'm using an Angular directive. Who has ever worked about Angular directives? Or right now are called components? Cool. Yeah, directives are kind of getting deprecated, now are components, but I'm going to talk about directives, which is what I'm most used to at this moment. And that directive, it is called pixel color. And this one is just Angular code that I tell, hey, I will have a directive that's going to be a HTML attribute, not an element, so I restrict to attribute. I will get a variable, or that attribute is going to be equals to whatever I pass. Can be a variable or a string, so it's going to be equals. And then on the link hook is a hook that is called before the element is rendered. I want to do this. So what I'm telling is that the element is an array. The element 0, I want to change the style background to that particular color. So that's how I get this effect. So I have only this file that can be used for view and for create, which is good. So I'm reusing code and I'm just prototyping, right? So that's a good practice. So if I go back to the template, I tell that the pixel color is going to be equals of the pixel dot color. So the object pixel with the property color. And then I have a bootstrap tooltip with the pixel dot name. So let's see how it looks like. So if I go to the pixels order, so I have all the pixels that I added to the database. This is coming from the database, as you can see here. I have a GET request, and here you go. We have all the objects that we want to. Of course, if we would be using the app in production, we would have paginate, which mean is handling. I recommend you to take a look on the mean documentation, how it looks, the pagination, or you could just implement infinite scroll, for example. You could just play around with those things. At the moment, I'm just showing colors. So here are the items that are on the database. So, and the bootstrap tooltip, which is already on the mean stack, is already there for the ones that I have named. Okay? So read was simple as that. If we talk about the backend, again, I have a root, So previously we had this, okay, and now we just add the .get method. Always that the server is requested with a get request for this endpoint is going to execute the list function on the pixels controller. So that one is here. What I do is, for the model pixels, I want to find everything if I don't specify, and I want to populate the property called created by, and Mongo knows that the created by is populated only with user IDs. So if we see on the request created by is automatically populated with the user information, which is pretty nice by using this. So it's the equivalent of doing in SQL adjoin tables, etc. And then I execute this query, I will get a promise, and then I show the result, cats. Why cats? That's interesting. Pixels. And if there is an error, I call the function error. And I show the error to the user. Okay? Yeah, that was it. For the policies, I had to add the get method. So previously it was like this, now it's like this. And I'm pretty sure in a few months we'll have a better way to build by him. Okay? Please support him because it would be nice to have a centralized way of managing all these things. Okay. So it's almost time to go. Any questions till now? Yes.
So I've been away from developing for the web for a few years, and now I'm coming back and I see that there's a lot of tribes and a lot of stacks of technology that you can choose. And you started saying that Express was already being replaced by something else and Angular is being replaced by Angular 2. So would you recommend going for the mean stack right now because it seems like it's getting deprecated, or should I use mean but with Angular 2? What should you advise?
That's a really good one. What I would say to you, yes, I do recommend, and yes, no, I don't recommend. So it's 50-50. Everything depends on your problem, on your budget, and on your state of mind. If you are up to go for mean, good, you go for mean. If you are up to go for Angular full stack, which exists, you go for Angular full stack. If you just want to use WebAssembly that no one uses yet because it's going to be in the future, just go for it. The thing is, if you are prototyping, you want things to work. And what's the best thing to make things work if you are using something that is stable and proven that works, right? On my personal, by my personal experience, if I want to develop something quick, I just stick to the old stuff. Because if I'm doing the new stuff, I have two problems. First, I'm not really experienced with the new stuff because no one is, only who built it, and I will take time to get experienced with it, and then we have the deadlines and stuff is not done. Second thing, if you use the most recent stuff, I'm pretty sure there are old browsers that doesn't support it. So everything is a matter of consideration. You cannot just say, hey, this is the perfect scenario for everything. No, it's not. I'm not telling that. I wouldn't tell it. For every problem, you have to find a proper tool, a proper framework to use, a proper stack. For my startup, what I found that would be the best option would be to use min.js. At the moment, I'm starting the process to get rid of min stack and having the backend on one repository, the front end on another, because things now are getting mature, you know. So now we have a clear picture about what should be on the website and what should not. So I'm not that worried on quickly develop the feature. I just want to make it work well. And last year when I was developing it, I wanted to get everything as quick as possible, you know. That's why I gone for min.js. But as I said, it's always a matter of discussion. Cool. Any other questions? Okay. So summarizing, with min.js you can do prototyping of the apps really fast. You don't need to worry too much about the stack because you just need to install MongoDB and Node and it will run. Yeah, and that's it. thank you very much for your attention. If you have questions, further questions, you can find me here tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, or you can just tweet me about any questions or any recommendation that you would like to, or if you want to give me a suggestion or telling, hey, Min really sucks because this or that, just do it. I will be happy. And thanks for being here, okay?